All right, welcome everybody. We are here today to talk about President's Coast. This is for some of you, and I know there's people still rolling in, and that's fine. This isn't, we don't want to be too formal here because this is really about engaging all of you, and we want to keep this presentation informative yet brief enough. Because one of our goals here is to really start to get some community input about what we're doing. My name is Scott Bishop. I am the founding principal of Bishop Land Design. I am the consultant, the lead consultant for this project. But yet I'm also a resident of Howes Neck, and in fact, PJ and I baked this up a little bit in order to figure out how we can put together really a path for the community. We're calling it the President's Coast, also a pedestrian highway. It's a multimodal path system, and we want to talk about how that might start to come together and how we get all of you to help us think about this path. What you're going to see is really just our first and initial attempts to think about where this might be. Our focus for this project is really connecting Quincy Center and via Broad Meadows, and then Germantown, and then landing in Howes Neck. So those are critical ways that we can think about connecting these communities. There are several ways that we're thinking about doing this. One is to make sure that we are creating a robust emergency infrastructure for the peninsulas as a subset of the path system, as well as making sure that we have alternative transportation for people to get into Quincy Center and to the peninsulas. What we do know is traffic can be a little bit brutal for those of us that live on there, and to share the roadways can be problematic. So this is another way to think about added bandwidth. It's also a way to think about safe routes to schools, because a lot of this is going to connect the schools and some of the educational resources together. And that's really our big plan. So what we want to do, we're going to have a series of a few meetings. This is the first one. This is really focused on what we're thinking about in terms of connecting Quincy Center and getting across Town River. We will have another meeting that's more focused in the Germantown area, and then what's going to be focused more towards the area in Howes Neck and Adams Shore. All of the meetings present very similar information, and we're trying to gather similar information from each of the neighborhoods so that what we give back is really the right type of information, and it will help us thinking about the critical design of the system. I'm going to get started briefly, but I just want to say we also have a steering committee for this project that helps us out, and we keep all of our elected officials from local to state to federal informed as to the progress of this project. It is funded by community preservation dollars. So that's a little bit about me. I'm a landscape architect as my professional training, and a landscape planner. And I'm going to just let PJ introduce himself because he's been so critical and is critical and helps lead the steering committee for this project.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. Hi, everybody. In a nutshell, I want to be as brief as possible because we have professionals here that are going to guide this meeting and lay everything out for you. But one of the things that I want to emphasize is that so much of the infrastructure that we need to build this network exists, has for a long time. It's just never been networked. So we call it the President's Coast, but it encompasses the city. So if you think, on our north, we have the Neponset River. So if you were to leave anywhere from our northern peninsula, Squantum, North Quincy, Wollaston, you come right down Wollaston Beach, Quincy Shore Drive, beautiful walk. Benches, shade shelters, $10 million view, everything's there. We don't have to do a thing. It ends at C Street, and C Street behind Quincy Youth Arena, a giant public facility, brings you into Broad Meadows. If you leave the middle, the peninsula that's pointing east, Howe's Neck, you come along the top of what we call the berm that brings you all the way. It's a beautiful walk, marshes on both sides. You come out of Howe's Neck, and it brings you to Broad Meadows. And if you leave our southern peninsula of Germantown, which is on the Fall River and the Town River, you come up Palmer Street, brings you to the berm, that brings you to Broad Meadows. Broad Meadows, we're still not done, but they're just about to turn over back to the city. The Army Corps has done a $6 million restoration on Broad Meadows. It's beautiful, and it's really starting to come into its own. Problem is, Broad Meadows is kind of a dead end. So everything connects to Broad Meadows. That's kind of the nexus of everything. There used to be a footbridge. The pilings are still there. We have all the documentation, everything. This is, that part of it exists. So there was a footbridge that went across Town River, a little stretch beyond the navigable waters, and that would bring you towards Town Brook, and Town Brook comes into Quincy Center. So it's possible, it's quite possible, to connect Quincy Center, the newly developed downtown, and think of it for those of us that have been in this city for a long time. That's one of the things when downtown was first planned and conceived was we're going to make Quincy a more walkable city, more pedestrian-friendly city. And now we have a whole new population in downtown Quincy that just not too many people lived there a few years ago. A lot of people live there now. So this would work in both directions. Our new residents, our new neighbors in downtown Quincy can leave downtown and on a beautiful boardwalk and walking paths, fan out along the coastline of the city of Quincy, hit all of our public beaches and all the amenities that we have to offer, and vice versa. Everybody that lives on the coastal communities would have an alternative way to get right into downtown. And like I said, the missing link is that footbridge. The pilings are still there, everything's still in place. We'll get into that, but that's the crux of it. I'm going to pass it over to Scott from Bishop Land Design. I want to thank the Community Preservation Committee for giving us some seed money to get this to this stage and gather input from the community. All right, thank you.
All right, thanks, PJ. So a little bit about what we're going to do today. Again, not a super long presentation. We're going to talk about what we just talked about, what is President's Coast. And again, I talked a little bit about the process. So we're having public meetings, a series of public meetings. We're going to have a fourth meeting after we have we're going to gather the input and then have a final meeting that is really to discuss the input that we had and how we move that forward into a design. The end goal of this particular process is that we have a conceptual design and we identify the permits that we need. That will hopefully get us to the next step, which would be more detailed design and then going into implementation. So it's a multi-step process, but this will get us to a point where we can all kind of see what this thing will potentially be. So how can you participate? Well, certainly you can at any point communicate with us directly, but we also have other ways that we want to get to garner your input. We'll go over that later. They're actually the things that are set up back here. There are tools for community engagement, right? They're helping you guys to think about all of the things that we have to think about, and it's helping to give us feedback about what your priorities are as the community, which again helps us figure out the design. All right. So just gonna keep that going here. And it should move forward 1 second. So we have our friend here, Frederick Law Olmsted. He is kind of our unofficial mascot for the project. A landscape architect, the first landscape architect. He helped actually define the profession, but he was also very prominent in the design of open spaces and the connection to the city. So that quote was really talking about, how is it that we create places for people that are in dense urban areas to enjoy the natural features of their surroundings? And that's another key aspect of what this project is hopefully going to do. So this is basically the first stab at an alignment in terms of how we're going to make this work. Again, we are very open to considering other aspects and ways that we do this. Right now, it's a line on a piece of paper, but that's another way that we're going to hopefully get community input here, is that you guys can tell us a little bit about those conditions if that's in your neighborhood. As you can see, our goal here is to connect Quincy Center via the Monroe Playground, and then going over the town brook. There's a couple locations where we could go. And this is the area that PJ was talking about, where the old footbridge was, into Passagonesset Park, which, again, as PJ had said, a huge restoration project that happened. Right now, there's really no points of access, but this becomes a very important node, right? Because everything kind of ends up connecting here. And if we think about, as PJ had said as well, Furnace Brook Parkway and some of those other connections, they're right over there. So this is a potential node for the future, as well as we think about the broader network of open spaces and trail systems in Quincy. And then we make our way really from Broad Meadows into Germantown. And we are going to see these in a little bit more in depth as we kind of go through here. In this area we call the Captain's Walk. And as you can see, connecting some of these beaches that are out in Germantown. Again, some really critical assets that maybe haven't gotten that much attention recently, but the water's clean, right? It's time for us to go back to the beaches because it's really worthwhile. So, and so making sure that people have access to those, and then making our way around. And again, some of these alignments are not exact. We're just starting to think about them and making our way through the cove, and then eventually ending at the crusher, for those of us that know what that is, at the other side of the cove. So again, there are several portions of these route that we do believe would be important, critical emergency infrastructure, but there are many portions that would be primarily for recreational use, both bike and pedestrian. All right. PJ, I don't know if you had anything else to add here.
Well, you're doing great.
All right.
How many miles is that?
That is a good
That's a
question.
good question.
That's okay.
We have
And I don't-
27 miles of coastline in total, running around the city. So it's probably that plus a little bit of Broad Meadows, but that would be up both in the Ponce River estuary and the Fall River estuary.
I don't know if I don't know, Masood, have you measured it or not? I'm thinking it's probably about 5 miles. Just because if I run around Hausenach, it's like 2 miles. Okay, so these are some of the goals of the project here. Improving the existing infrastructure. A lot of what we're looking at is, as PJ had said, is existing infrastructure. Adding new resilient infrastructure, thinking about how we do that for a longer term period of time. That includes thinking about resiliency. A pedestrian highway. I know some people don't like the word highway, but we're taking it back. And what we want to do there, I'll go back a little bit here, is really thinking about how we're going to be connecting the neighborhoods, again, connecting those to Quincy Center, lifting up those isolated communities that are part of the trail system, and making this fully accessible, right? This is going to be ADA accessible. We're not going to make it so that it's only for one group. So this is really, and that, again, making it ADA accessible is good on many levels. One of those levels happens to be that it makes it fundable for federal funding. You can't build a federal project that gets federal funding without making it accessible, nor would I ever design a project that isn't accessible. So that's just my own ethos here. But those are our goals. We want you to add to these goals if you think there are other goals to the project. Again, this is how we're starting to frame it, but we're very interested in hearing what some of the other goals might be for the community. This is the new little toy that the city had, but again, when we think about emergency infrastructure, we're not talking about having huge fire trucks on on giant pathways, right? We want to keep this to a scale that it is predominantly, it looks like it is a pedestrian route, but that we can use emergency vehicles when we have to. This is I don't know if this one is from Riley or not, but PJ and I are very familiar with what happened during that storm. We have seen recent storms as well. And so that emergency infrastructure portion of this project is really important. So this is really the process as I had described before. This is what we're trying to accomplish right now: planning, and then moving to a concept design. So all of the community input actually happens here, so that we don't get ahead of you guys. We want to hear from you, and then we'll start the design process. And then what we determine at the end of this phase is the permits that we need. And then hopefully we will get additional funding, maybe while we're doing this work. That would be awesome. Or we get it, or we get it with the concept design in hand so that we can show that around to folks. And then we move to the permitting process, design development, construction documentation, and implementation. All right. Okay, so really, again, this is how, again, just another way to see this. We'll be going through, we're looking at the sites, we are trying to figure out what some of the constraints are along the alignment that we selected, and then we will combine that with the community engagement. And again, that was really brief, but I wanted to just point this out. Like, we believe that there are many good resources for us to look at once we kind of get through that concept phase. Because this is connecting the housing on Germantown, because it's connecting schools, like, this is kind of a home run in terms of thinking about how we might use funding, especially funding that might be coming through the transportation bills. And so we want to be there. We want to be ready, and we want to be able to be at the door when that funding becomes available with a plan, right? That's how we win. So that's the goal. That's why PJ and I said we have to do this now so that we're ready, and we hope that we can get further than we are or plan to be in order to be at the door with as fully designed documentation as we possibly can. All right, again, we're going to just take a brief look at the map here, and then we're going to look at this first alignment as we kind of come from Quincy Center. And you can see it's great, it's right by Kilroy Square, so that's a really great area for people to park. Maybe they get a bike there, and then they can take this this route here. As many of you know, you can see the Y is off to your left. This could become a resource for them as well. And then we can see Quirk Mazda. We see the beginning, right, of the town brook, which you can see there is a great width there for us to potentially use. Those of you that went on the walk, you saw how beautiful this area is and how there's really not a lot of access. And again, you can see the store. Here's a little bit of a drone footage so you can see it for real, not Google Earth wise. And we really think it's a beautiful area, and if you had access to this, right, it's really connecting that resource. It's a hidden gem in the middle of our city right now. It's not even being thought of as a potential resource. So you can see the kind of widths that exist here. We just wanted to give it some metric, and some of the adjacencies in terms of the skate park, the Monroe Playground, the approximate width of the buffer. So this is what we do in terms of this existing conditions analysis that we're currently undertaking to best understand where we might, think about the pathways. As we make our way over, you can see that we have the tide mill. There might be a bridge there. We could go around here, and then the existing pedestrian path. Again, we want to think about this as improvements. How much bigger do we want to make that? Again, the Quirk outfit did a great job with living up to the Chapter 91 requirements here. And so, again, this is the drone footage of us kind of going over that area. You can see where the town brook goes into the town river, as well as where this proposed connection will be. Here's the historic piles, and there is a pile of granite, which you can just start to see now that the vegetation's starting to tamp down. And here is a historic image of that footbridge. Why is that critical? It's critical because it's permitted. Those piles are there. So when we think about making that connection, we don't have to do a lot of heavy lifting. Here it is coming from that other angle. And extending that pathway makes a lot of sense for these folks as well, because they've got to think about resiliency. Right now, they're a little bit low, and that's a transformer that gives a lot of power to Quincy Center. So we want to make sure that may be something that we can help to accommodate when we do this process, is like, how can we actually build in resiliency for them? They probably will throw a little bit at that, and that allows us to get our full width along that wall there. Again, even though it was a little bit chilly tonight, it was still quite beautiful back there on Town River, and just really changing, the feel of that particular environment. And that's a pretty robust wall as well. So a lot of, if we had to build that wall from scratch, it would be a little more difficult. And again, here's some of the metrics to that. You can see the transformer station, the approximate span that we might have to deal with here, the shore, the revetment, and then Broad Meadows, and on the way to the park over here. And then, again, you can see the kind of alignment and how we might make a connection to the park and these existing trail systems. It got a little windy. And that footbridge, it did look to be about 20 feet wide, I think. So we would be using as much bandwidth as we can. We certainly wouldn't want that to be a tiny little pathway here. So again, this is just an idea of how that crossing might occur and its adjacency. And it's not a super long span. It's not like this is going to be a $50 million bridge, right? Like, this is something that we believe we can accomplish in pretty light ways.
And it's beyond any navigable part of Town River. The drains are, just before that, there's a small marina, but after that marina, it's mud flats and low tide.
Yeah, you can see it over here as we kind of rise up. You can see where some of those boats are, and then this is we believe this pile of granite was going to be used to help to build the next bridge that never got constructed.
What you're saying that is the bridge doesn't have to be something that raises or lowers.
Nope.
It doesn't have a height requirement.
It will, based on resiliency, have a height requirement, but
The only boats that can go up there now would be a small outboard, kayaks and canoes. They still will. Anything, we're not gonna impede any boat traffic. Yeah, it'll be a fixed bridge.
But just small craft.
Small, exactly. Because like I said, that drains right out at low tide. It's not navigable at all, but we want the footbridge to be pretty.
yeah, today it was low tide, so.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Has the surface been decided? Will it be tar like the rest or something different? The surface of the path?
No, the only parts that would be tar are probably the parts that exist as tar. So the short answer is no. I'll leave that to Scott. But we're gonna be using like there was a brief image of the footpath, the trail system that exists inside Broad Meadows.
Yeah.
We're using that. It's gonna be that.
Like
It's gonna be stone. Thank you, Dave. By the way, Councilor McCarthy is here with us this evening. I really appreciate you taking the time, Dave, to be here. But yeah,
There are requirements for accessibility, so that's number one. So let me help clarify this. So there are requirements for ADA accessibility, which means that it has to meet a certain threshold. Loose gravel is not one of those. It can be a certain type of gravel that we can use that has a binder in it. It can also be a boardwalk. It can also be because we will have some raised areas that if they're going through a marsh, for example, it can't be just a earthen berm. You have to allow for flow and function of that. And the same here, like this is going to have to be a bridge because you're going over that, and that might change the surface type. But
Surface is a big decision, and there's a lot of people don't necessarily think about all the options, so.
no, I think that certainly is something that we would love to get input on. All I'm trying to frame is that because our goal is to have it be ADA accessible, that as a certain threshold, like we can't just have a lawn or we can't just have loose gravel. Those aren't considered to be accessible, which wouldn't help us get the funding. But is it asphalt? Is it an organic binder? Is it fully a boardwalk? Those are all, I think, really important questions. And if at any point people want to weigh into what that is, I think it certainly could be based on the performance in each of the areas as well. Building a boardwalk on an area that could be on solid surfacing, like an organically binded material or asphalt, would be cost prohibitive potentially. So again, that's another thing to be considerate of, is like what the different environments require.
Just a quick question. I think you guys said this is the first time you're rolling this out at all, but for community meeting, is Dave Murphy and Natural Resources had this yet, or is that the next stop? I mean, this presentation.
He has seen a shorter version of this. Julie, who works for him, is part of the steering committee and has been showing up and saw a version of this in the steering committee meeting. So he has not seen the final version of this. But this is the Quincy Center version of this. We have another version that's the Germantown version. So those will all kind of go together. But he will certainly, he knows of the alignment.
Yeah. No, I've spoken to him, but this is a very nice presentation on outlining, nice and clear and simple, at least, even when we talk Quincy Center to some point up to Washington Street is still Ward 1.
Yeah.
So that's when I peak up. When you guys had me out in 1-6 and 1-5, I was like, I can't call that shot. I'm staying here in the neighborhood,
He referenced Julie Sullivan, and I want to get her title right. She's the city's first environmental scientist.
Yeah.
That's all right. So she's also done some great work just compiling the existing trails. She just did it recently, and it's on the city website. But like I said, we have these resources that we always have for the most part. They've just never been networked. I'll use that term again. So we keep as many people as, I said this to somebody here earlier tonight. My biggest fear is inadvertently leaving somebody out. So, we're reaching every constituency we can. Quinn Cycles is here tonight. I appreciate that. QCAN, just everybody. We want to make sure that everybody's involved in this, has input. We need your ideas. So, but Dave, one of the things too is that we want to be able to bring to the people that have made this possible, the CPC, City Council, Dave Murphy, and the Mayor's Office. We want to be able to go back to them with this public input, the presentations and what the community had to say. So that's a good question, and thank you.
All right, so this again is just another kind of overview. You can see how critical that connection is that we keep on discussing, and that's a reason. Connecting Quincy Center this is where it's got to happen, honestly, and so that's key and critical, and that activates the Broad Meadows node, which again will help us make future connections to the other peninsulas, but is key and critical connecting Germantown and Howes Neck.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Do you have a plan, or how would it be implemented for I say a person like me, I don't have a car, I take public transportation, maybe a Lyft, whatever. But how, I can see myself walking along any number of parts of this, but not the whole thing at once. And so how, would it be possible for people to just, you know, I mean, how would you leave from one place to say, okay, I'm gonna do from the Broadway where the carrot is to the end? You know, how would I get there? Is there going to be asphalt, you know, for someone? How would you get to someplace in the middle, other than with a parking lot?
Right. Well, I think that's a great question, and I think that might be, you know, thinking about how we overlay like a transit map. So, you know, this is where the bus stop is, and this is like how you would make that connection there. I think that's certainly information that we'll be looking at in the process and trying to get that out to folks as well once we kind of start to finalize the documents for the planning phase.
So there may be like little wooden posts that are visible, but still very natural, like in the new report, where it's got the signals of, you know, go this way to get to that point.
Yeah, no, wayfinding is a really important part of this project, and it was something that I did not mention, but I think that's one thing that we should add to the goals. It's certainly something when we looked at doing some of the preliminary work on the berm that is critical, but yeah, making sure that this connection is known, not just from itself, but from the external areas, I think is a great point. So I appreciate that. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to pause here because this is where you guys get to actually stand up and do some fun stuff back here on what we've set up. We've got a series of exercises. We like to call them games because they really help. It helps for us to have you guys frame aspects of ways to think about this that aren't just like, it's not just like, I want the path or I don't want the path. We want to get more specific information. But prior to that, I'm certainly open to taking any questions that anybody has.
May I make just a small statement?
Yeah.
Can I take, well, I think I can talk loud enough. My name is Mary Julie, I'll be very brief, I'm on the shy side, but I live at 44 Lynn Street in Quincy. I've tried calling it Germantown. People say I don't live in Germantown. It's kind of funny because I'm not in the peninsula. People say I don't live in Adams Shore or Marymount. I made the mistake once of saying that I live in Howes Neck, and Howes Neck are so territorial and funny about their property that I will never make that mistake again. But Lynn Street is off of Palmer. It's sort of down by the Blue Store. So anyhow, I'm not for the project. One, I don't believe there's a footbridge structure over time that can withstand the northeasters. I think either way, the wind or the tide will take it away. If you walk past my house right now, 44 Lynn Street, it's a pretty house, I take care of it very nicely. You'll see that there's cinder blocks all along my chain link fence because I get hit by northeasters very differently than anybody else by the city. Very differently. The wind blew my chain link fence so that the cement posts need to be re-cemented. I still haven't finished cleaning it up. When people drive their boats behind my house, my property borders Rock Island Cold Salt Water Marsh. It's directly behind my house. I can see the boats go by my house. When people drive their boats behind my house, it stresses the osprey. The osprey are in Rock Island Cove Saltwater Marsh. I see them from my backyard. The boats go by and the mother hovers above the nest and she makes calls. She's stressed out. And she does that until the boats leave, and they have 3 chicks each year. One time I saw kids throwing rocks there, so I don't want them to have any more stress, because I feel stressed out. I watch them every year and I kind of care about them. Another thing is, I think this will provide an area for people to potty. I'm very concerned about safety. There's no lights down there, there's no traffic lights. I think that Nobody should be around water at night. I think it's a safety issue. I don't know how dive teams can get out there when they will get the call that someone needs to be rescued. I swam back there as a kid. I can walk out to the marsh, avoid the gullies and the mud, and I can go swimming. It's very, very deep. Boats go down there. I don't believe it's good to alter Mother Nature. My neighbor raised his land and beveled the edge into mine. His grass is lush. Mine is brown. The tide comes up halfway into my yard. You can see the tidal line. During Riley 2018, Lynn Street also got hit by the storm. Nobody knows that. But I lost electricity, had water in my basement, lost heat. I was there during 78, and there was nothing like Storm Riley. In my back fence, the tide came up to the top of my fence. It went out to the street, and I never thought it was going to leave. It is not weather-friendly down there. And to rise it up for the veracity, what was that term? Resiliency? That means raising up the land. You can't do that to me. You cannot raise up the land. I will flood out more. And then, for the, go ahead, I'm sorry, you wanted to say something?
No, I mean, I think these are great points. These are issues that are designed, right? So if you're not for the project, I would say that is certainly your opinion. And I think that's an opinion that we're asking you to give in some of these engagements back here.
2 more points.
We're not going to fill the marshes, just to be super clear. That's not what we're doing.
Well, I saw the map, and it's going to try to go over that creek with a bridge.
So if you think that that's the improper alignment, the best way to give us input is to show us another way.
I do, I have it. I
Okay.
thought of it tonight.
Perfect.
So to go
That's great. That's great input.
from the berm straight down to Broad Meadows. Rock Island Coast Saltwater Marsh flooded today. The tide was 10.57 feet at about 11 o'clock today. No, I think it is important to say that, what I said to you, the reasons why it should not be used, and to say, no, I think that is important, and that's all I had to say, so.
No, that's fine. I believe that everyone should give their input and it should be weighed equally. The issues are exactly that. I mean, if you believe in having a pedestrian way and you think that it's better aligned on the high-level sewer, that is perfect input for this process. So we encourage you to do that. So
I've been there since 1977. I look at it every day.
No, sea level rise is real, and so is resilience design, and that's something that I do for a living. Thank you. We have a few exercises. One is one that some folks already did. That is be an urban explorer. We have a series of maps that actually look at the entire alignment, and you can make notes. I believe there is an email address. You can photograph that map and send it back to our office, and we'll compile that data. We also have a drop box that I think we're putting at the Quincy Welcome Center right downtown. We have Share Your Imagination. These are postcards from the future that you will be writing about your experience on the pedestrian highway. And we also have Share Your Ideas map. And then we have Make Your Priorities Known. You will all be given Quincy dollars, and you will be able to put those, you have a limited amount of those, and you can decide what you would like to spend them on. All right, all of this input helps us understand from your perspective, A, your priorities, B, your concerns, C, what is it that we're supposed to think about in terms of some of the concerns here, the alignment, right? What might be the best alignment, what some of those issues are in that map. So please, you don't have to give us all the good news, right? If there are other things that you want to tell us about, if it's this area floods, if it's there's a derelict structure here, or other situations, that's part of what we try to do, because this project is to improve the condition in many ways. Again, providing emergency access to areas that won't have that during high flood events. B, connecting resources, natural resources, to the community, and C, creating an alternative mode of transportation for those of us, which again will help us mitigate future sea level rise. Okay, so any other questions or comments? It would, again, we have a process which we'd like to hear your voice, and that is best kind of dealt with these tools, but I'm happy. I want people to utilize those tools and not be subject to and be tired out and not use those. But I'm happy to take some comments. So.
Just a quick comment.
Yeah.
There are 3 bridges that you've shown here. The most critical one's the one that you've been just showing us.
Correct.
The other 2, the project is fine without those.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
So is that number 1 on the list to do, the bridge first? Without the bridge, I mean, you just do the paths and stop? You know what I'm saying? But you go back into where you want to do the bridge number 1, and then work your way back. If you go from the Quincy Center, stop at the bridge, you know, where are we A, B, and C here as far as the planning is concerned?
We have not made any determinations on phasing at this point. No.
You know, that's part of this process.
Yeah.
It's the biggest part. If you're gonna hook up with Broad Meadows, the bridge is number 1.
Yeah. No, that's it's a very important connection for
Missing
sure.
link. That's the
Yeah.
missing link in the city.
Yes.
Just one of the transformer station. Have we talked, is that owned by NSTAR?
National Grid.
Grid, okay, Grid.
I was like,
I know they're one of my clients, so I know they're very security conscious. Are they gonna really give us that space in front of their transformers?
well, it's Chapter 91, so whether we can play nice, which is what we plan on doing, right? But they also need to. That is also very low. So we think there's fertile ground for great collaboration there. Let's
They
say.
have to be having conversations
Yes.
amongst themselves right now on how they are gonna do
Yeah.
something there. They're going under now. They're going under one now.
Vulnerable.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that's not good for our
So
city
this is
either,
one- I think
honestly.
this is a great opportunity for us to work with them.
That's
You're
great.
right. Councilor, you
You
had-
gave them-
Oh, you know what I want to, Councilor Noel DeBona is here this evening also. Councilor Elias, thank you very much, Noel, for taking the time.
No, I'm good. I want you guys to keep it moving, and I'll be
Okay.
happy in a second.
Okay. And I'll be around too. If you guys have other comments and you feel you need to voice them to me while we're in process, that's good. But any other questions?
Just wondering, when all the design, engineering, construction is decided upon, will you be going from point A to B, or will you be going on different sections, you know, which is like start at the southernmost place and then just keep following the line?
We don't make those determinations until we have A, funding, B, have a reasonable plan, C, have a permit path, because all of those things could change whatever our approach is. We look to establish the alignment is the first thing that we do in the planning process, which is what we're doing right now with your input. You know, that's floods all the time, or there's a lot of velocity there that no one knew about. Those are all really good comments that we like to take into consideration for sure. So I do not have what we would call construction phasing. That comes, I could show you where that occurs in the timeline. It's way over on this side, but it's, yeah, no problem. Okay.